Hey everyone, it's Anchor Pete. Welcome to the show. Today is the first episode of the Lasser Cast.
All right, what's up, guys? I'm Danny. I also go by Dr. Zayas on most of my social media platforms. Write for geeksofdoom.com. I'm on the Stardust app at Dr. Zayas God, and I've been a lifelong horror fan since I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 3 when I was probably 7 years old on, I think, the Pix 11 movie. And my dad just kind of said, yeah, that's okay. You can watch Freddy Krueger at 7. And now I'm doing the same thing with my daughter, who's 9, and I'm spending my COVID time introducing her to a bunch of horror movies. So that's me.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Chris D'Onofrio. I'm on Twitter at Future Boy Chris. I have a Facebook page called Future Boy Reviews. I'm on Instagram as CP7D, and I'm on the Stardust app as Chris D'Onofrio. Just a huge film fan in general. I always have been, but primarily horror. I mean, primarily horror. This is. I could talk about this up and down all day long. I grew up on. My first introduction to horror was hiding behind the couch watching the Thriller video, watching Poltergeist. There's a running theme here. I was hiding a lot, but I think when you're scared of this stuff as a kid, you grow up to love it even more, and you hope it scares, the next generation or anyone you show it to. But I'm just happy to be here with these guys talking about this, and very excited. Let's do this.
Yeah. So I've actually never met Danny or Chris in person before, but we all three of us have this one friend in common, Brian. We have two things in common at least. One is that we all have Shudder subscriptions. We love watching Shudder. And so I had the idea of maybe we could go through some movies on Shudder. But besides that, we all really love the films of Mike Flanagan. And so that's why we named the show The Lasser Cast, because of the Lasser mirror from OCULUS. And so I think down the road, we're going to review that film too. Today, we're actually going to review his first film, which is Absentia. And this is my first time watching it. I know for you guys, you've seen it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just watched it for, I think, the third time today. It's funny. I was telling you this, Pete, before we got on. This was one of the first movies that I reviewed for Geeks of Doom, like literally 5 years ago. Right. And I started my review by giving Chris the credit for recommending it to me. And the thing that he recommended it to me was, you got to watch this movie. It has no cliches. And I went, that's impossible. It's a horror movie. And it really doesn't. The basic... What?
I messaged them at midnight. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. I just watched a horror movie. It has no cliches. I don't even know what to do. And you're like, yeah, right. 92 minutes later, he's like, oh my God. He messaged me back.
Yeah, at 1:30 in the morning Eastern time. The basic plot line is very simple. A woman, her husband went missing, and in order for her to get a death certificate, for her to finally move on, 7 years legally have to go by, and she's about to declare him dead in absentia. Roll credits. And of course, right at that exact moment, he returns, and there's some spooky stuff with this tunnel by her house. Her sister has just shown up, recovering from rehab, from drug addiction, and they're dealing with this mysterious tunnel, and where did her husband go for 7 years? And the thing is, with Mike Flanagan films, the whole plot line of it being a horror movie is always secondary to the story about the characters, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about a lot. So it's really about this woman who's stuck between trying to move on from a husband she thought was dead and now like her and her sister dealing with him back. Yeah. And where was he? Why was he gone? What was holding him? You know, no more spoilers, but you know, that's really what it's about. Yeah.
And you know, I should let the viewers know too that we're going to talk about it at first without any spoilers, and then eventually we'll get to spoilers. And in the description, I'll leave a time code for when we're done talking about the spoilers. I watched a couple of documentaries about the making of this film, and it was real interesting how they came up with the story of it. By the way, I think you did an awesome job summarizing it, Danny, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like one of the things that I saw was that Mike Flanagan had actually made a couple of different movies beforehand, but they were independent character study movies, right? And they didn't really get a lot of recognition. And so he was trying to make a movie that was going to be like his calling card movie. And so he had lived near where this tunnel was. Like he lived near it. And so he was like, you know, we could make a movie around this tunnel and we could, you know, try to figure out how it's scary. And so they cast the people in the movie. They started to figure out how they were going to film it. And then they started to develop the story for the movie.
It's funny because I didn't even pick up on it the first time I saw it, but the whole Billy Goat's Gruff aspect to the movie. And what's ironic is, so I'm watching the movie again and I'm trying to like do my homework for the podcast.
Yeah.
And I look up on Wikipedia, Billy Goat's Gruff, and on Wikipedia, it actually lists Absentia as a like interpretation of the Billy Goat's Gruff story. So I'm like, wow, okay, because the Billy Goat's Gruff has been around for a long time, and now it's forever linked. You know, because of course Wikipedia is the place to go, but it's like forever linked now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of this. Another thing Flanagan realized, he said this on a podcast a few years ago, because I've listened to every podcast that he's been a guest on probably 2 or 3 times.
Nice.
And I believe he said this on Shockwaves. He said that he didn't realize it while he was making Absentia, but something that profoundly affected him as a kid. Because the thing with Mike Flanagan was he didn't really go back to horror until he was in his teens and even in college. Because horror scared him as a child. And he said that he didn't realize till after he made Absentia that there was an episode of Fraggle Rock. Scared the shit out of him. What? And it was, and I forget what it was called, but it was about a tunnel.
Okay.
That ghosts of Fraggles lived in, that they never came out, and their spirits were trapped in this tunnel. Oh, and he said he didn't realize till after the fact that he's like, oh my God, I basically made like Absentia's a riff on this Fraggle Rock episode.
Oh, man.
The only thing I really remember about Fraggle Rock was watching it on my grandmother's home box, like HBO, but the actual box. Like, because apparently, that's what I remember about Fraggle Rock. But that's crazy. That's awesome.
That Fraggle Rock was great.
I did my homework and I thought I had some real interesting information, but that Fraggle Rock just trumps that, you know? What's interesting about that is that the whole Billy Goat's Gruff idea, that actually came from his brother. And do you guys know that his brother is in this movie?
Yeah.
I know his brother's in it, but I never check who his brother plays when I watch it.
Yeah, so his brother, he is one of the people, so the 2 sisters, right? We have Trisha, right? She's the one that's pregnant, and her husband is the one that's been missing. And then the other one is Callie, right? Yeah. And so Callie, as she's going around her sister's neighborhood, runs into a couple of strange people. And one of them is this young guy, right?
Is he the guy who Doug Jones is the father?
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So Doug Jones's son in the movie is Mike Flanagan's brother.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He needs to eat something because he was really skinny back in 2011.
Hey, is it okay if we go on my little Doug Jones tangent real quick?
Oh, I love Doug Jones.
Well, so I know you guys have gone to cons and stuff. Have you guys ever met Doug Jones at a con?
No. Okay. I'd love to, though.
Yeah. So Doug Jones, I'm going to make sure I put this picture in the video when it comes up. But, like, I met him once with my daughter. And it was maybe, like, one of the best moments of my life, just meeting him. And not because I was like all starstruck and stuff, but he's like the nicest friggin' person I've ever met. Like he was like super nice to me and my daughter. Yeah, like that's what I've heard about him is he's just like this really nice, loving guy. He was like so awesome.
I've heard nothing but good things about him.
Yeah.
Now you've looked into this. Did you hear about it? They called it Doug Jones Day.
Doug Jones Day. That's right. That's right.
And the amount of coverage, and you don't realize it until after you watched it. Now that you know the information, you go back and watch the movie. The amount of coverage and shots they do on Doug Jones in those 90 seconds he's on screen.
Yeah.
It's insane because they're like, listen, we got this guy for one day, and they actually had craft services that day, and they hired a couple extra people to be on set because they wanted to impress him, and then realized like he's such a down-to-earth dude, they didn't even really need to do that, you know?
And since we're kind of going into the background stuff, the movie was mainly filmed in Mike Flanagan's apartment. And Trisha, the sister that's pregnant, she was pregnant with Mike Flanagan's baby, you know?
Wow.
That's his kid, you know?
Really?
Yes.
It's funny because the one of the podcasts that I heard him talking about how as a father who like how he's had to like raise a child in a divorce, and of course now he's with Kate Siegel and they have kids together, and so I didn't realize that Courtney Bell, right? That's her name.
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Courtney Bell, who is terrific, and I would see her in more things. I think she's terrific, and even Callie, Katie Parker. Like Kate Parker is. I don't even know if you realize this. Kate Parker is in Doctor Sleep.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have a single line of dialogue.
She's in a lot of his movies in very, very small. She was also in Hill House in like
She's Poppy in Hill House. She's fantastic.
Oh, I
love her in this.
Oh,
she's almost unrecognizable, right? She's Poppy in Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
But she is. I totally buy them as sisters.
Right.
In Absentia.
Right.
I love them on screen together. Like they're that estranged relationship.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just I totally buy the two of them as sisters. I think they're both.
That's one of the things I wrote down in my notes that I took today was that everyone is relatable and they have a genuine relationship. And they have realistic dialogue. And I wrote down the line, "You giant whore." when Katie, I call it Katie. When Callie comes back and she it's like they're getting to see each other again, and of course Trisha's pregnant, and she's like, "Who was it? A hottie? You giant whore!" And I laughed out loud because it's like that. My sister lives in upstate New York.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her in person since February. But like whenever we talk on the phone, it's that same kind of like jovial, joking, self-deprecating. Yeah, like they totally have that natural vibe of sisters who love each other but haven't been there for a while, you know?
Yes.
And then you tell your sister, "I have to go because I smell like an armpit's asshole."
Oh,
I wrote that line down too.
Yes. Yeah. I wrote that in my notes. Armpit's asshole. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the best lines I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You know, there's two detectives in the movie, right? And one of them, who's like the partner, he's played by Justin Gordon, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, Justin Gordon is one of the producers of the movie. Him and Daniel, the missing husband, are the two producers of the movie. Basically started a Kickstarter for the movie, and they wanted to raise $15,000 to fund it, right? And they started to make these videos to kind of promote their Kickstarter, and it just took off. They just made a ton of money.
Because these vlogs, I'm watching them again the other day. I haven't seen them in years. And it's reminding me so much of John Carpenter's Halloween and how everyone kind of pitched in aside from their acting roles to make this thing happen. You know, like Jamie Lee Curtis was bagging up leaves and giving them to Deborah Hill, and they could spread leaves around. And the vlogs, having, one actor do a different vlog, I'm like, it's such a great, like, everyone's pitching in, everyone's excited about this, and we want to get this thing off the ground. And the incredible thing about it is, when you read up on this, You hear $70,000 budget, $70,000 budget. Yes, but they shot this film for $25,000.
That's right.
Shot it, which is bonkers. The more I watch this film, I love the guy who plays Detective Mallory. He's so
Dave Levine. Yeah, he's
I'm just all in with that dude. I think he's terrific in this. I don't think there's a bad performance in this. I really don't.
For a movie, yeah, because usually when you get a movie that's made for this cheap, and when you know you're kind of using your friends as actors in it, you typically get that one friend who's not that good. Like they're doing it for free, so you let them act.
Right.
But like, I kind of feel like his performance again goes back to like what I said about Flanagan, where it's all about like every character has like this like emotional hook. And I really love how he's this he's this multi-dimensional character. He's not just like the angry cop. He really wants to be with Trish, and he is willing to. There's that great scene in the car where he says, I will always take care of the baby. I will always be there for you. I'll even try to help with Daniel, the husband. It's like that's such a real like human move, like for a guy in his position. And you don't really see that. You don't see characters like that in a lot of horror movies.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of wanted to pose this question to you guys and just see what you think too. I've actually seen on Twitter where some people have been critical of Mike Flanagan because I guess they feel like his horror movies aren't like, I guess, upsetting enough or violent enough or have as much gore. And in the video that I watched, he was talking about how that's not his style. And I mean, we could tell from his movies, obviously that's not his style. Even though I would argue that like in Dr. Sleep, there's one of the scenes that's like one of the most disturbing things I've seen in years.
Right. I mean, listen, once we get into spoiler territory for this,
the
end, and I tell you, the first couple times I saw this movie, I did not notice this. And now I can't unsee it. The ending of this movie is like, it's almost out of character for how I know him as a filmmaker now.
Yeah.
What happens at the end of this movie? It's really like the hair is standing up on my arm just thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, Dr. Sleep, Baseball Boy, my God.
How about the fact that Hush is a straight up violent slasher movie? Like that's a home invasion slasher movie with a lot of blood, if I could remember. I think I've seen it twice. I mean, I think the thing that a lot of I think the thing that a lot of like traditional movie-going fans might take issue with Flanagan is he's more concerned with telling a story about characters and giving them real emotional weight and not giving you the jump scare or and that goes back to Chris's recommendation to me 5 years ago at midnight. You got to watch this movie. It has no cliches. Right. And I was keeping time, and I was like pausing the movie. 40 minutes into the movie, nothing has happened. Like aside from like a few little like, of her lucid dreams, there's almost nothing in the movie that would even classify it as a scary horror film until like 55 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And that was a big criticism of Dr. Sleep also was, oh, well, nothing happens for the first act. And I'm like, if you don't go with Danny on his journey, then you don't give a crap about what happens to him in the last act when they're back at the Overlook.
Right.
Like, so, I mean, that's where the criticisms of Flanagan bother me because, like, he's making great films about people that just happen to be horror movies.
Right.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of Chris Stuckman's video where he said, "What's wrong with horror movies and horror movie audiences today?"
I remember that.
Yeah, and I always think about that when I hear people complain about like a movie like Hereditary or The Witch or a Flanagan film,
Yeah. And those are some of the best horror movies I've seen in the past like 5 years too.
Yeah.
And Flanagan is famous for saying, especially growing up on Stephen King, Flanagan famously always says, I want to be able to remove the horror element from my films completely and still have it be an enjoyable drama and enjoyable, you know what I mean? Like he's like,
Yes.
I want to be able to remove that element and still have a film there with the horror element taken out. And that's why he's so successful all of the time.
Yes.
I can't think of another horror movie director who has made me cry hysterically more than Mike Flanagan. Like The Haunting of Hill House was literally 10 hours of me sobbing and then occasionally screaming in fear. Like,
Right.
So
Yeah.
like, and I totally get where like a couple of 19-year-olds on a date going to see a horror movie are going to be turned off by a movie like this, or even Dr. Sleep, which is 2.5 hours in the theatrical version.
Right.
You know, because they're not going to get that like jump scare, you know, blood squirting out moment.
Right.
But,
Right. And don't you feel like this movie could seem very ambiguous to where like it could just be that nothing supernatural happened at all? You know, like
and this
the fact
gives you that option.
Yeah.
It gives you like, well, what if it gives you almost these clue moments, you know, you know, and it shows you like, what if they just walked away together? What if they just, you know, stuff like that. And I love that about this film.
Yeah.
Those little moments where they imagined other scenarios, that was like one of the best parts of the film. Like first when Trisha's imagining what might have happened to her husband, and then later at the end of the film when they're imagining what
I think that's such a smart scene.
Yeah.
Where she's talking about like the first year I envisioned him that he was a secret agent, you know?
Yes.
And it's like, what would go through your head? You know, you'd think the worst, and then you'd start to go through all the progressions.
I didn't realize this from my viewing of the movie. I only realized it from watching the YouTube videos. But the partner, so he's Detective Flanagan is the partner cop, right? And
Detective Gumshoe?
Yeah, the gum chewer, yeah. But did you know why he's a gum chewer?
No.
Because the implication is that he's a former drug addict. I didn't know that watching the movie, and then they said that in the YouTube video. And so when he's picking up on Callie possibly using, it's because he's been there.
And I'm glad to know that it actually makes his performance even better for me, because stuff like gum chewing can be a crutch. It's a crutch for actors. It's a way to get through a scene. And being that I saw his blog, I know that he's an actor, and he seems like a talented actor. But I like that backstory now. I'm glad you brought that up. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and you know that documentary I'm talking about, I think it's probably with the DVD of the movie too, because it's an officially made documentary, and you know.
I have not brought myself to buy it. As much as I love the movie, I have not brought myself. I've not been able to bring myself to buy a copy of the DVD because I cannot stand the cover.
Poster art.
Yeah.
The goddamn, which is still used on Shudder.
It is
of the girl being dragged, clawing into the tunnel, which never happens in the movie.
Right.
And Flanagan hates it too, which just makes it perfect.
From this point on, there will be spoilers, so make sure you go watch the movie and then come back and finish our review when you're done. We should probably just explain for people that maybe haven't seen the film, but they still are watching us, like just kind of what essentially happens for the rest of the film.
So basically, you know, Callie comes, she's in recovery, you know, Trisha's pregnant, like Danny had mentioned, and Trisha's having visions of her husband Daniel, who's been gone for 7 years, and all of a sudden he just appears in the street one day. She's outside with Detective Mallory, who she's at this point ready to move on with. She's just received Daniel's death certificate, because she's now, you know, been put him in absentia. So she's got his death certificate, and they see him out in the street. Daniel is back because of, probably shouldn't gloss over that. Callie sees a man in the tunnel. This man, Walter, played by Doug Jones.
Right.
And thinks he's a homeless man in the tunnel. brings food, leaves it at the end of the tunnel, and is warned by who you'll find out later is Walter's son, who's been looking for him, not to leave gifts, not to leave things at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
So now Daniel comes back, and maybe I shouldn't be explaining this. Daniel comes back and basically tells Callie, you know, they go through, you know, sitting with the detectives and whatnot, and basically tells Callie, you shouldn't have traded with it. And she's like, what are you talking about? And jewels were left at the front door. And that was what was brought to her after she brought the tunnel, so to speak, the food. So now this thing has somewhat attached itself to Callie, has attached itself to that household, because now Daniel is back in there too.
Daniel is taken back by the monster. Callie and Trish are at home, and then the lights are out, and there's this great scene where you don't really know what happens, and then Callie wakes up and Trish is gone, and she runs to the tunnel, and yeah, there's the scene that we mentioned already, and then like basically Callie makes the decision, I'm willing to trade myself to get Trisha back. She's pregnant. She has what should be a stable life with Detective Mallory, if, you know, possibly. And I'm just a recovering junkie. This is going to be my like sacrifice. And then she sees what happens, and she tries to get out of the tunnel, and that's it. Yeah, like Chris mentioned before, like an ending that just really rips you apart emotionally. I just noticed it for the first time today. So Detective Mallory now, at some point in the future, I'm assuming it's not too far, he's doing in a almost perfect symmetry to the opening shot of the movie, which is Trisha putting up the very last of the flyers for you know, missing person with Daniel on there, her husband.
Yeah.
Now it's Detective Mallory putting up missing persons for Callie and Trisha.
Yeah.
And he looks to the tunnel and he sees, I think it's Callie.
Callie, yeah.
And she's standing there like this in the most perfect, like, flash vision of what would become the bent neck lady in Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
I noticed that for the first time the other night too, and I've seen this movie 5-6 times, and watching it on the tablet, I'm like, oh my God, bent neck lady.
Callie can see him from where she is in the tunnel. He can't see her, and then the final shot is some unseen monster just moving its fingers on her shoulder.
Yeah.
Like,
So good.
and it's just, and it fades to black, and that's it. It's just gloomy as all hell.
Okay.
One thing in particular that really stood out to me was when Daniel goes missing again, and then she has to tell his parents, who are on their way to come visit her, that he's gone again. That was like real effective.
The scene with Mallory having to sit down. Every time I watch it, I'm like, I just sit there like, this is brutal, because he can't even get the words out.
Yeah. And then, and like, when you can tell, and this is where he's great, when he knows how awful and how horrible it is to say that I'm gonna have to ask you to fill out the missing persons report. And he knows, he's like, I can't fucking believe I have to have her do this again.
Yeah.
Horrendous. Yeah.
But you brought up the scene with the parents. There's this little moment, and again, it's like these emotional moments that with Flanagan movies always outweigh the scary moments, where when Daniel is back and he's like a stammering mess, but the first time that like Callie goes in to talk to him. He notices that he looks at her belly and he notices that she's pregnant.
Yes.
And he looks and he gives like a point and he smiles.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, again, like I almost started crying.
Yeah.
And then she like hates him. And then they like fall into each other's arms, cry. And I'm like, motherfucker. Like, that's
great.
Oh, just like, that's the stuff that, like, again, like you said it, Pete, like a first time like feature length director, you expect like James Cameron's Piranha 2, The Spawning. you don't expect like a film of this quality to be somebody's, because like even the great directors, like I just watched Dark Star, John Carpenter's Dark Star, for the first time. 1974. It's fun, and you can see where his career would go, but there's a literal beach ball is used as an alien. And it's like, how?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween. Okay, he's got it.
Yeah.
Like Flanagan just freaking got it immediately.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, look at Bob Clark. I mean, children shouldn't play with dead things. It's got moments of fright and greatness, moments.
Right.
Otherwise, not good. And then he goes and makes Black Christmas, arguably one of the greatest slashers of all time.
Right.
Well, you're right. Flanagan, out of the gate, he's so focused.
Yeah.
This is his first feature. He knows exactly what he wants. He's so focused. I think they shot this in 15 days.
That's right.
Mostly at night too, right?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
In his apartment. So to me, one of the things that made this movie far more scary, that unsettling feeling, that goosebumps feeling, is that you don't know what the hell it is.
Yeah.
You don't know what the thing in the tunnel is. It's not.
And that's another. I'm sorry. That's another reason that, like, I feel that somebody might criticize. For, like, what is it? Is it it's that, living with it's the unknown. What you only see the shadows.
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street, coming through the wall kind of stuff, which is really cool. But,
I mean, there's a great coming through the wall / ceiling moment in this, and my first thought every time I see it is, man, how did the Nightmare on Elm Street remake completely fuck up this moment? Like, completely. Flanagan, with $25,000 initially, nails this moment. Nightmare on Elm Street probably had a $12 million budget to remake. Just completely squandered what should have been an easy moment. Done with a sheet. Done with a bed sheet.
Oh my
in the
God.
Original, completely ruins it. Again, I digress.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you try to wrap your head around what the creature is, and it's kind of really hard to do, because you're like, is it something that's in another dimension, and does it come into our dimension? It's some kind of insect-like creature, because you guys were talking about the sound design before. I feel like that's what really disturbed me, was that sort of that clicking noise that it would make. I was like, what the hell is this?
No, there's like another one of those like great scenes where like I guess it's like the exposition scene, but it's done in a way where it doesn't feel like it, where Callie's like you caught me you slapped me in the face, so to show you that I'm not just a drug addict who's who's making shit up, I actually went and researched, and there's all this stuff, and she's bringing up, it's almost like, this is an It moment. This is like the history of Derry in It Chapter 1, where she's going back 100 years and pulling up history of all these things. I also got like vibes of obviously a movie that would come out years later, Us, with like all the tunnel stuff.
Okay.
And she mentions the three billy goats. She mentions something about like Egyptian like bug demons or something. So there's all these things that she brings up almost in passing when trying to explain these disappearances, including Walter's, Doug Jones's character, and she's trying to like get Trish to believe her, and that she's not just like an addict that's back on stuff, and making stuff up again.
That's another great example of how Flanagan takes these. You've seen it in every horror film. The laptop computer exposition dump. You've seen it in every horror film. But Flanagan takes this moment and somehow changes it with just subtlety, things that stand out to me, like when Callie says when Callie basically stops Trisha dead in her tracks and says, "Hey, this is important. Like, listen to what I'm telling you." It's so subtle, but you don't see it. Every other horror film, they just kind of let them just drone through these moments. And I love that Callie stops Trisha and says, "Hey, look at what I'm telling you. Look at what I'm showing you. Stop. This is important." And she does. She focuses more on just to let her know, like, listen, I'm not just babbling like, some like off the wagon, lunatic. Just listen to what I'm telling you. It's one of those very subtle moments that jumps out to me. And really with Flanagan and his filmmaking in general, these subtle moments, just his different way of doing things you've seen a million times. It's terrific.
Yeah, the same thing goes with her lucid dreams. Is the idea, like, you're watching it and you're like, oh, it's a dream sequence. Every horror movie has a dream sequence, but that ties in with the psychiatrist scene where you're going to go through this. We've talked about this. You're going to go through this stuff, and you're like, oh, it's not just cliche, like jump scare, you're having a dream, wake up sweating in the middle of the night moment. It's something that she's going through. Is like one of the stages of grief that she's going through with Daniel having been missing for so long. And then my favorite moment in the movie, in terms of Flanagan kind of, upending a cliche, and maybe it's because I've spent a lot of time in quarantine during this time. I've been running a lot.
Okay.
My favorite freaking moment in this movie is Callie has been running through the tunnel and back. And then after Daniel comes back and she's completely freaked out, there's a scene where she goes out to run, looks at the tunnel and says, "Fuck that," and goes the other way. And I went, yes! Because how many times it's like, it's almost like Scream territory where, you're running up the stairs, or you're going to the room that has no exit. And she's like, no, I've had enough of the dark, scary tunnel. I'm not going to go back in there now.
Yeah.
See, now, when you were talking about the psychiatrist scene, were you talking about when Trisha goes to the Oculus short and has a psychiatry moment?
Yes. When she goes and stares into the Lasser.
That is the original Lasser glass from the Oculus short and the gentleman who was in the Oculus short.
Oh, okay. There's little subtle things that come out when the police are interrogating Daniel, or when they're talking to his wife and her sister. And one of the things that was upsetting and creeped me out, but it's just subtly done, is when they're saying, well, where has he been? He has animal bones in his stomach, and he's wearing the clothes that he was wearing when he went missing, right? And they never say where those animal bones came from. So your imagination is working like, what is it? Is this creature torturing him? Is that the only thing he ate?
And you're supposed to assume, I would imagine, because it happens, because Daniel comes back the following day, the day after Walter's son drops off the garbage bag, when Callie is there bringing the jewelry back. And essentially, now let me ask you guys, let me put it out there to both of you. Who do you think the creature brought the jewelry to the front door? Or do you think Walter's son set her up for a trade? I've watched it a million times and I'm still not sure, and I'm not sure if I'm not supposed to know.
I think I took it as the creature did it and not the son. Because I feel like the son in general was looking out for Callie. Like, I don't think he wanted her to get.
Very good point.
Yeah.
I also take it as that whatever the creature is, it has a system. And I think that goes along with like what we were just talking about, the laptop scene where a lot of the things she brings up, the monsters in those stories, like the three billy goats, you're able to bargain with the troll. Like the first billy goat says, "Oh, don't eat me. The one behind me is fatter and big." So like you can bargain with the monster in that story, and I feel like maybe that's what Flanagan was trying to do. Yeah. But again, he left it ambiguous so that we can sit here and have this conversation 9 years after the movie came out.
Yeah.
And that's, that's genius in one way, and to other horror fans that might be like really annoying and like give me Annabelle.
Basically, we all should have watched the episode of Fraggle Rock before doing this.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the scene that you mentioned before, Chris, which you said like really stands out to you and really upset you. It's the thing on the floor in the tunnel, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So my interpretation is that's the baby.
That is the baby.
Yeah.
And you're really not entirely sure, and it's the way he shot it. You're really not sure what's on the ground.
That's right.
Until you and it's again, I hate even saying it until you're like, and that's an umbilical cord. My God.
Yeah. Oh, in general, like, where would you rank this among other Mike Flanagan films? Because I have not seen. You guys have mentioned Oculus. You've mentioned Hush. I've not seen those. I've not seen Gerald's Game.
Oh, I'm so excited for you. Yeah. Flanagan's the kind of filmmaker, like, as we go through this, there is stuff I'm thinking about, things that I like, just single moments in his film that I cannot wait to talk about.
Yeah. Every movie.
Oculus, Gerald's Game, these single moments that I like that make him that filmmaker for me,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where, to get to your question of where would I rank this, as much as we've been gushing over it, I would say it's towards the lower half, but only because of how much better his work got. It's not like it, to bring up the joke example I used before, it's not like we're doing James Cameron's filmography and okay, Piranha 2: The Spawning goes down here because this isn't a Dark Star. This isn't a Piranha 2 situation. This is a great film that the filmmaker just went on to make better films.
Yeah.
And because of that, it ends up in probably the lower third of his filmography by no fault of itself.
I agree 100%. It's one of those, if you're gonna force me to pick a least favorite, not even least favorite, because it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna pick Temple of Doom. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Back to the Future 3. Right. I love these films. I love them. But if you're gonna force me to put one behind the other two or behind the other 7,
right,
it's gonna be this one. So I don't know. I would say this and Before I Wake hover pretty neck and neck. But again, both very good films. Very good.
I think I have this above Before I Wake, but even Before I Wake, like you said, like another movie that like made me bawl in the living room.
There is not a single bullshit jump scare in this entire film, and that is huge. And this came out in 2011. This was in a time where that's what like your most mainstream big studio theatrical run horror film had. They were just filled with bullshit jump scares. This film does not have a single bullshit jump scare.
I mean,
agreed.
My big issue with a lot of the, like, I was very anti-Insidious for a long time, and I've come around on that train. I know, but like, I don't consider I know Chris and I probably disagree on this. I know we've had this conversation before. I don't consider The Conjuring to be a great film. I think it's fine. I think it's good. Right. But that is an example to me of like what Chris was just describing, a movie that it's a modern horror film that is made for mass appeal. And it was so dependent on loud noises and, you know, lights going on and things jumping out at the screen. And it worked. It did. It was good.
Right.
But I will take a movie like this where, like, I wrote it down, 54 minutes of a 90-minute movie before you see the monster or it even shows up.
Right.
You know, the dream sequences with Daniel, like, with his mouth open, being all creepy with no music and just being there, like, in the background. Like, it got me today. Like, and I've seen the movie before.
But I just was really impressed overall with the quality of the acting and also just the depth to the emotion in the movie itself, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was great. I'm really glad you guys suggested it. Yeah. So if you guys are down, then I say, like, you know, 2 weeks from now, we could pop out another episode of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know what then? Like, I think we can kind of call it a night right here. And
Okay.
but I wanted to thank both you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks, Pete.
Oh, no problem.
And yeah, Pete, this has been great. And, you know, I'm very excited for this. A few days leading up to it, and
Yeah.
exceeded my expectations. I cannot wait to do this again.